Listen, I guess I should say happy birthday to Amalgamated Bank. It started 100 years ago, providing banking services for women garment workers that other banks would not provide services to.
That's exactly right, Bertha. And thank you for having me, and thank you for telling the Amalgamated story. So you're right, 100 years ago, a group of mostly European garment workers here in New York were not able to be banked. And so they took the bold step of starting their own bank. And here we are 100 years later, still talking about workers' rights and many of the other concepts that were started back then.
Now you are the head of what is a publicly traded company, Amalgamated Bank, and in some senses, you've put yourself right at the center of a lot of really big, some might say controversial issues in this country. One of the things that you pushed for was to get a code, basically purchase code for things involving guns. And you got Amex, Visa, and MasterCard all to sign off on that. But you also ended up getting quite a bit of backlash over that. Senator Tom Cotton saying that you're weaponizing, ironically the words that he used, that you're weaponizing the banking system.
Yes, it is true that there's been some controversy around this measure, but I like to remind people that actually what we did is we established we didn't establish. We applied to the International Standards Organization and received approval for a merchant code for gun stores. Now, there are 6,000 gun stores, and together they have revenue that far exceeds the minimum required for a merchant code. And merchant codes are in place for every other industry that you can think of. Hundreds of them exist, everything from a shoe shop to a car store to any purchase you make. Generally, they fall into a very specific merchant code. It's within our obligation as a financial institution to understand the nature of the business that we're banking. And that's important because there's illicit activity that happens with predictable patterns along certain industries. And so it's important that we understand those industries. We received the code back in September, and it will help us to flag illicit behavior and give that information to law enforcement, and it will assist law enforcement in addressing gun-related crimes.
You know, you've said as an immigrant, your parents are from Ethiopia, you grew up being fairly comfortable sort of being the other and standing out and not necessarily following along everybody else's path. But I wonder, given what's happened with regard to this, how hard is it to do that? You know, there's so many CEOs that want to take a stand on things, but we are starting to see a big wave of backlash and people saying, hey, stay in your lane and just do business.
Well, I'm comforted by the fact that we are actually in our lane. I don't get involved in matters that are not relevant to financial services and banking more specifically. This is a case where we are today financing illicit behavior. Anything we can do to better understand where that's happening and alert authorities where we think there is suspicious activity occurring is perfectly within the swim lane, if you will, of a bank. And I think it's important that we follow the laws and the obligations we have as a banking institution to do that, just as we would with money laundering, with flagging activity that could be indicative of human trafficking, those kinds of things.
If we sign on to Amalgamated Bank on your homepage, you talk about the principles and ideals and things that the bank stands for. And you stand for promoting rights of LGBTQ, promoting the rights of workers, promoting climate change, and also fighting violence and reproductive rights as well. But I wonder how you continue to navigate that. Your stakeholders are behind you on that, but we're also seeing how all of this has become more politicized. With the fall of Silicon Valley Bank, one of the accusations was that the bank was so busy being, quote, woke, that they took their eye off the ball in terms of what they were actually supposed to be doing in terms of their long-term investments. How do you weigh that, and what do you say to critics who charge that some companies are just getting too involved in social issues?
Yeah, I hear that. And I think it is important for us to take every issue and think about what's the appropriate place for us as a financial institution to be involved, or in some cases to not. No matter what we think as individuals, there are times when we may decide that it's not the appropriate place for a financial institution. I think it's really critically important for us to recognize the outsized influence we have as banks and other financial institutions in access to capital and in financing behaviors. It's important for us to recognize the role we play in that, and important for us to be accountable for the bad things that could occur as a result of that. And so I don't talk about a lot of these topics quite broadly. I talk about them within the context of what's appropriate for us as a financial institution to live up to our ideals. I think it's important for us to be thinking about a safe, secure, and resilient economy for everyone. I think that benefits not only the underserved, but it benefits the whole of American society. I also think it's really important for us to think about what most Americans want. And I think most Americans want a safe, secure, and resilient society for everyone.
You know, I find it ironic that you began your career as a journalist covering business, and then you decided you actually wanted to be in business.
That's right.
Where you are now and the things you're talking about now, is it what you thought it would be, or do you feel like this platform has become bigger than what you thought a CEO would normally be doing or talking about?
Well, for me personally, in every job I've had, this is the first time I've been the CEO of a bank, but in every role I've had, certainly corporate responsibility, thinking about the impact the organization has on its community has been some part of my job. And that's been true for many years. And what I am pleased about nowadays is that I'm in an environment where I'm in a B Corp. That means that I have a structure that allows me to think about all constituents. So shareholders are important, but also customers are important, and our investors are equal to our customers and our employees and other stakeholders, including partners and the society at large that we do business with, whether that's suppliers or others. And I am pleased to be in a structure that allows that. I also recognize that it gives me a little bit of a luxury that some others, my counterparts, CEOs of other companies, may not have, meaning that when something is right for the economy, right and just for people, right for my children and future generations, I have aligned constituents to talk to. I have a customer set that is aligned with those values. I have a board, I have employees, and I have investors who understand the values that we stand for. And that gives me a bit of an opportunity to move in a more agile fashion than some companies would.
If you broaden that out, I think, to other companies, I'm wondering what advice would you give to leaders of smaller companies? In some ways, does that give you more leeway, or does that help you differentiate yourself from your larger competitors?
I do think it's a differentiator. I do think that Amalgamated Bank, throughout its history, throughout 100 years, has been a different kind of bank. Those who know us and bank with us are there because of this mission. People who care about where their money sleeps at night, we often say, or you know, if you're placing your deposits, whether those be your retirement savings, your payroll, or your college fund for your children, you want to know that on the other side, as that money is being lent out, it's being lent to things that are consistent with your values and consistent with what is important in society overall. So those are the kinds of people we have as customers, and I think that is a differentiator. I also think that there are many other companies that are looking for ways to be the best corporate citizen they can be within the structure that they have, within whatever paradigm exists. And what you've seen in recent times is some companies pushing that paradigm a little bit. Some of that is resulting in backlash or reactions that they didn't expect, and they're testing those boundaries again and again. I think that there has been a tipping point in this country around some of these issues, and you'll continue to see this push and pull occurring across industries for quite some time.
What do you mean by a tipping point? Which way has it tipped?
Look, I think it is tipped in our favor. I'm the optimist, right? So I'd like to believe that people are thinking less about short-term profits, and they're thinking more about the general and more broad impact. They're refusing to ignore the science. They're refusing to ignore the data that suggests that if you are focused on a more just and sustainable and safe world for everyone over the long term, that it benefits everyone in the short term as well. And I see more in the news, as you do. I see more books written about it. I hear young people, my own children and others, coming forward very strongly. And Amalgamated Bank stands for these ideals, which we receive a lot of positive feedback from our customers and employees and others around those.
Patricia, thank you very much for that insight, and wish you continued success. And again, congratulations on being at a company around for 100 years. I understand you're going to have your own conference with other bankers to talk about these issues coming up in a couple of weeks. 70
banks from around the world are here, values-based banks from a number of countries, I think about 45 countries, to talk about these issues. So thank you. I appreciate it.